Adeptus Custodes, the unbreakable guard of the Emperor, his personal bodyguards, fated and blessed with eternal vigilance. For 10,000 years they stood at the gates of the imperial palace, shielding their lord from every threat, manifest and hidden. But now the golden blades depart their halls. For the first time since the Great Crusade, entire cohorts of these warriors venture to the stars, and woe to him who dares stand in their path. In the vast reaches of the Imperium, there is no force that can compare with the Emperor's Praetorians. Their bodies were altered from early childhood, each one forged into the perfect warrior, an unsurpassed strategist, and an indomitable guardian. The Custodes are a moving doom to any who would oppose the will of the Master of Mankind. The gifts bestowed upon them are staggering. Their skill in combat, their instinct for the enemy, and their mastery of the blade seem to transcend the bounds of human nature. Just as the Astartes surpass mortals many times over, so too do the Adeptus Custodes stand incontestably above the Space Marines. They are the elite of the elite, a union of perfected bodily might and unyielding strength of spirit. Yet, unlike the Space Marines who fight in unbreakable ranks, the Custodes are solitary by nature and design. Each acts alone, wielding weapons crafted specifically for him and armor honed to the last line. Such equipment turns a single Praetorian into a force equal to 10 hardened fighters, and when whole companies of shield-bearers enter the fray, the gold of their armor sweeps aside enemy hordes, like a gale scatters smoke from ruins. When their ranks surge forward, the Emperor's foes rout before the first blade is stained with blood. In battle, the Custodes are like heroes of ancient legend, made flesh, lethal and remorseless. From the depths of their armories they draw weapons, capable of turning the tide of any confrontation. Swift squadrons of Virtus Praetor on jet bikes rend enemy war engines asunder, and Alarus Terminators with equal ease crush the leaders of heretics and titanic monsters. The enemy realizes his doom too late. His commanders lie fallen, his machines reduced to heaps of twisted metal, battle lines cleaved, and a panic-stricken rout begins that seldom yields salvation. Such is the fate of all who dare challenge the will of the Master of Mankind. Even a small band of Custodes can pierce an enemy's ranks, leaving in their wake a vortex of bloodied blades. But for all their destructive power, they are, above all, guardians, not conquerors. They are the 10,000, standing since time immemorial at the Emperor's side, guarding him from threats. The path of the Master of Mankind began on Terra in the darkness of the long night, when the world of mankind was filled with monsters and spawn of decay, when armies of barbarians wandered across ravaged continents under the command of mad lords. It is no accident that the chronicles of those times are hidden in the deepest archives of the imperial palace. But had a bold scholar penetrated those annals, he would have seen that even the most ancient sources speak of tall, shining warriors with plumes upon their helms and golden spears, the Emperor's companions in his earliest deeds. In the times of the Unification Wars, amid the chaos of the thunderous warrior uprisings, and at the dawn of the Imperium's birth, the Custodian Guard remained the unshakable bulwark of their liege. It was held that no sight could surpass the Golden Legion, moving into battle under the Emperor's own standard. Over the centuries, when they were named Legio Custodes, they acquired a fame untouched by the shadow of oblivion. Their armies, led by Captain General Constantine Valdor, were unstoppable. Even during the heresy, when the galaxy was plunged into the fire of civil war, they preserved their loyalty and iron resolve. They were called the finest warriors of humanity, yet it was in that age that the Custodes first tasted the bitterness of defeat. Warmaster Horus inflicted an irreparable wound upon the emperor, and the Praetorians could not fulfill their sacred oath. In the millennia that followed, they bore the heavy burden of shame. After the civil war's close, Legio Custodes became the Adeptus Custodes, and could no longer fight at their lord's side. The emperor remained upon the golden throne, half dead, held aloft only by the technologies that kept his spirit in the realm of the living. Henceforth, the Praetorians' charge was altered, to guard his legacy at any cost. As a token of mourning, they clad themselves in sable raiment, which they did not remove for countless years. For centuries, they stood in ceaseless vigil. Their genetic perfection slowed the biological march of time. Death could overtake them only in a hypothetical catastrophe or beneath the blows of an enemy. Many of them were more than a millennium old, and in that span they raised their mastery to the limits of possibility. They studied secret disciplines, honed tactical maneuvers, and anticipated every conceivable mode of assault. Through bloody games, ritual exercises, the Custodes tested Terra's defences, time and again probing every route by which an enemy might infiltrate the palace walls. Their minds were exercised in fractal strategic schemata, calculations spanning centuries, and combat simulations in the hallucinariums, all for the preservation of absolute combat readiness should the day come when they must again carry blades beyond their homeworld. When the Great Rift opened, and the awakened Guilliman, primarch of the Ultramarines, once more became Lord Commander of the Imperium, that day arrived. Warp storms hurled forth legions of renegades and roaring demons into real space, and the Sol system itself came under threat. Humanity's enemies drew near Holy Terra, and it became plain. The Custodes could no longer keep silent vigil while the Imperium crumbled. Threats that could touch the Golden Throne must be destroyed in advance before they could take root. Thus, leaving a garrison upon Terra, tens of shield companies streamed out to the stars to exterminate those who dared challenge their lord. Their assaults were like a blade of wrath, forged over 10,000 years. And although, since the time of the heresy, the Custodes have taken part in countless secret wars, mere mortals could not endure knowledge of those campaigns. The Custodes suppressed threats beneath the Himalayan shoal, where deadly entities lurked in runic crypts, carried out operations in subspace teeming with living nightmares, destroyed chaos cults and those radical inquisitors who believed that the emperor could be exalted only after his death. Even now, when the 10,000 have gone on the offensive and burned traitors and heretics across the galaxy, such battles do not cease. Like the Imperium itself, the Adeptus Custodes wage war on all fronts, and none of those fronts permits them to lower their blades. For a whole century I stood my post, shrouded in the sullen shadows of the Sanctum Imperialis. Motionless as a statue, yet ever watchful, unfailingly ready to repel any unseen threat. Days, months, years swept relentlessly beyond these walls, while within them almost nothing moved and nothing changed. For 100 years I did nothing but wait, and yet, should any danger arise, I would slay the enemy in an instant. For exactly a century I stood at my post, and now, as my watch draws to a close, I will tell you this. Patience is also a weapon. Custodian Warden Tibaris Constor. In the dark age of technology, the human race nearly perished because of its own arrogance. Leaving its cradle, humanity strode ever more confidently among the stars thanks to its innate adaptability and the militant strength of its spirit. Science and technology in that era advanced at vertiginous speed, enabling the colonization of ever more distant worlds. The colossal reaches of the universe seemed to contract as the powers of Terra's children grew, and the relentless light of human progress drove alien civilizations into the shadows at the galaxy's fringes. Thinking machines, the continual development of new methods of interstellar travel, and the invention of ever more exotic weapons played their parts in these successes. But the most crucial factor of expansion was the ability and audacious resolve to alter the human genome. Believing themselves uniquely exceptional, the Enlightened tech leaders sated their unquenchable curiosity and bent the laws of nature to their will, playing at being gods. In the end, that arrogance brought humanity to catastrophe and then to the brink of total extinction. Planets drowned in blood-soaked insurrections raised by local populations, often unrecognizably altered by monstrous mutations. Genetic wars swept across entire systems. The fire of the psionic apocalypse consumed stars themselves. The vast human empire writhed in terror and impotence. An impenetrable veil of long night descended. Terra stood at the very center of that galactic calamity. The planet, once a diamond in humanity's crown, became a veritable hell, wrought by forbidden weapons and biological monstrosities. Its inhabitants wandered in a darkness of ignorance. Yet many of the technologies that had destroyed civilization survived in caches within hermetic bunkers and biomantic crypts. Gradually, humanity, driven from the abyss by the whips of cruel dictators, began to claw its way back, and some of those caches inevitably fell into the hands of those self-proclaimed tyrants who were prepared to wield ancient weapons once more. Terra again stood upon the brink of annihilation. Upon its surface, barbarians, born of genetic manipulations, battled reanimated corpses sewn together from scraps of flesh, obeying the commands of madmen, zealots, and bloodthirsty tech cannibals. The greater part of the records of that age is forever lost, destroyed, or buried within the vast archives of the throne world. Nevertheless, a handful still know that it was in that epoch the Emperor rose, and that he, whether divine being or consummate superhuman, managed to put to worthy use the treasuries of data left by humanity's earlier rulers. Relying upon those ancient and dangerous technologies and upon his own powers both incredible and unfathomable, the Emperor fashioned warriors capable of uniting the planet. The task that faced him was no easy thing. He hungered for peace for mankind, yet attainment of that peace could be achieved only by military means. The most learned of imperial scholars are agreed that in his early campaigns of conquest, the Emperor employed living weaponry, the legions of thunder warriors. The techno-barbarians who comprised those ranks, reborn into mighty but flawed super-soldiers with lives deliberately curtailed, fulfilled a single specific purpose, and thereafter ceased to be of use to the master of mankind. When the Thunder Warriors perceived that their days were numbered, the Emperor was already contemplating grander aims and was creating the first of those fighters who would, in time, become the Space Marines. Even the most erudite imperial sages cannot say when the master of mankind wrought the Custodes. The truth lies scattered among disparate testimonies of the past, tales told in primitive hieroglyphs or in drawings upon cave walls, and in records preserved upon stasis-sealed reams of parchment or on the pages of tomes secured with genetic locks that no living man may open. Those documents speak of giant demigods who strode beside the Emperor, his trusted bodyguards and venerated counselors privy to his secrets. The Legio Custodes, fought at their lord's side upon fortress walls and held back the baying packs of beasts belonging to the northern raiding tribes in the battle wherein the Emperor of Mankind struck down the butcher god worshipped by the northerners. The blades of the Praetorians felled the heads of the Emperor's enemies and drove the army of iron demons back across the red fields. That is the small measure of what yet survives in the echoes of those distant times. In the final years of the campaign to unite Terra, the Thunder Warriors finally realized that their Maker had endowed them with but brief lives, and deeming themselves betrayed, they turned upon him. To defend the Emperor, there then rose a host of several hundred Custodes. It is believed that even at that time, they were led by the legendary Constantine Valdor. In suppressing the rebellion, the Praetorians mercilessly exterminated the obsolete soldiers. When the merciless, barbaric purging of the no longer needed armies, a fitting conclusion to the age of strife, finally ended, the cradle of humanity at last achieved the longed-for unity. The Emperor, for the further flourishing of mankind, turned his gaze to the stars. In the ensuing years, armadas of the Great Crusade sprang from Terra, charged with the conquest of the galaxy. In the first phase, they secured the Sol system, and the Emperor, displaying wisdom and diplomacy, sealed an alliance with Mars. Having received the technological support of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the crusade gathered momentum, and the crusading host surged into the void. Many billions of soldiers of the Imperial Army, proud warships, the Space Marine legions, and countless other formations set forth to reclaim humanity's starry dominion. In the early stages of the campaign, it was led by the Emperor of Mankind himself. As expansion continued, the crusading fleets increasingly dispersed and began to operate autonomously, and they found the lost primarchs, the sons of the Emperor. Wherever he went, the Legio Custodes followed. An unstoppable golden host of 10,000 warriors equipped not only with the finest arms and armor, but also with all manner of secret technological specimens unearthed by Terra's armies on ancient human worlds. Besides such marvels as anti-grav battle tanks and fearsome potent disintegrators, the Praetorians had access to the Empire's best armaments. Their land raiders were endowed with a uniquely warlike spirit, and bolters, power blades and heavy weapons were handcrafted by the most gifted artisans, for such august and astonishingly skilled warriors deserved nothing less. Wherever the Emperor fought, the invincible Legio Custodes fought at his side. Guided by the Emperor of Mankind himself, the Praetorians brought death to any foe, yet the harshest and most tragic trial awaited them. It seemed that under the Emperor's aegis humanity was destined to rule the galaxy, but events unfolded otherwise. Committing the most treacherous of betrayals, exactly half of the Primarchs turned against their father. Thus ignited a civil war more savage than any conflict humanity had endured up to that time. It was called the Horus Heresy, and it led to a tragedy of galactic proportions. It should be noted that while the Brotherhood of Space Marines furiously fought among themselves, and the Imperial Army and the Adeptus Mechanicus were torn by vicious internal strife, the Legio Custodes strangely took almost no part in those battles. The few surviving records of those dark years allow only conjecture as to what the Praetorians were occupied with. There are hints that during the years of the heresy, another monstrous war was being waged. Invisible to the rest of the Imperium, and one in which only the Adeptus Custodes had a chance of victory, it nevertheless saw the 10,000 fight in two of the most crucial engagements of that troubled era. the burning of Prospero, probably the first armed conflict of the heresy, and the siege of Terra. The assault on Prospero took place before Horus raised open rebellion. The assault was intended as punishment for Primarch Magnus the Red and his wayward legion, the Thousand Sons. On their distant homeworld, they had been recklessly persisting in the use of their psychic gifts and plunging ever deeper into the warp, in direct contravention of the Edict of Nicaea. No one knows for certain what finally compelled the Emperor to intervene. Fragmentary reports from disparate sources suggest that a psionic catastrophe erupted on Terra, an event directly tied to the mental gift of the Crimson King. Be that as it may, Constantine Valdor and his Legio Custodes were tasked with leading the force charged with seizing Magnus and delivering him from Prospero to stand trial before the Father. From their earliest days, the Praetorians had borne the magisterium lex ultima, a symbol of exalted station that marked its bearer as answerable to the Emperor alone. Never before had so arduous a charge confronted them. Valdor, however, was resolved to fulfill his duty without falter. He had intended to pursue a diplomatic course, yet Space Wolves under Primarch Leman Russ joined Constantine's force, and the affair descended into merciless bloodletting. The Fenrisian, inflamed by Horus's treacherous oratory and by an unreasoning antipathy toward his sorcerer brother, was transformed from the intended jailer of Magnus into his executioner. Although at first the Captain General rebuffed Russ's insistent demands, it soon became plain that Prospero's warlocks were tainted by a corruption, and Valdor was forced to act. He led his brothers in golden armour down to the surface of the accursed world, and there the custodians, in a grim engagement, cut down many followers of the Crimson King. The Sisters of Silence aided them, their null auras shutting off the Thousand Sons' psychic assaults. Only by the intervention of Valdor's warriors did Russ's legion manage to withdraw from the field before the entire planet was consumed by a howling warp rift. What followed the events on Prospero was a season of uncertainty and doubt. But when the war drew to the throne world, none could mistake where the front lay. During the siege of colossal proportions, the Legio Custodes, together with loyal space marines defending the Emperor of Mankind and his palace, showed no mercy to the traitorous Astartes. The Praetorians did not falter even as megatons of ordnance vomited from the blazing skies, as demonic spawn tore through the veil of reality, and as traitor titans loosed salvos from guns capable of laying low cities upon the fortress walls. Throughout that nightmarish battle, Valdor and his 10,000 valiantly repelled assault after assault. Despite the heroism of the Custodes, to their eternal shame, they failed in the most vital of the tasks laid before them. As is known, during the defense of Terra, the War Master directed the course of the fighting from afar, from his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, which loomed in orbit. At the very end of the siege, when the throne world burned and the traitor host ravaged the outer precincts of the palace, Horus suddenly lowered the shields of his battle barge. Why he acted thus, no one knows. Perhaps a remnant of his former self remained in Lupercal, striving to thwart the designs of the dark gods. Or perhaps the traitor sought, in his last moments, to stand before the Emperor and slay his father with his own hand. Be that as it may, the Emperor of Mankind immediately gathered an elite detachment of Primarchs, Space Marines, and the Legio Custodes, and under his command the assault group teleported aboard the ship, bereft of shields. A monstrous melee awaited them. The Emperor's warriors, scattered throughout the desecrated star vessel, were forced to fight for their very lives. Sanguinius, lord of the Blood Angels, fell by the hand of his own brother, Horus. But that loss proved not to be the most terrible. No matter what exertions the Legio Custodes applied, they could not prevail against Lupercal, who had been endowed with supernatural power. Only the father himself managed to overcome his rebellious genetic son. Yet the victory was won at too high a price. The War Master mauled the Emperor with blows bolstered by the power of the warp, and when the Loyalists came to his aid, the Emperor was barely clinging to life. Since that time, he has been condemned to abide forever upon the Golden Throne, whose systems will not permit him to cross the threshold of oblivion. In that condition, he continues to guide and protect the faithful citizens of the Imperium. If the life of the Emperor should finally be extinguished, humanity is doomed to soon follow him. Heracles described the precise arc of the guard's spear, the weapon's power blade passing through ceramite, flesh and bone, cleaved the traitor's neck, and his helmet, together with his head, tumbled down the steps. Crimson blood gushed from the wound. Kicking the corpse that rocked in place in the belly, the custodian sent it after its severed head, but frowned as he noticed that at the foot of the stair 2 more traitors in armour had appeared, sons of Horus. Lowering his halberd, the Praetorian unleashed a barrage of rounds from the built-in bolter upon the foes. One enemy was hurled backwards with a riddled breastplate. The other held firm and lunged up the steps, firing in return. The custodian staggered under the bolt impacts, but none of them penetrated his auramite armour. A less worthy warrior in his place would have mocked the foe, revelling in his superiority. Heracles, however, merely flashed forward and drove the tip of his blade through the legionary's faceplate, the man failing to evade. "It's clear here," the custodian transmitted over the vox, contemptuously shaking the dead traitor from his spear. "The western stairwell is clear as well," came Litanus's reply. "Engaging at the northern arch," Artoris reported, and Heracles heard in the background the clash of colliding blades and the roar of bolters. "They are trying to break through the plaza of the Peacemaker again." "For the 3rd time already," observed the Praetorian, at a measured run toward his comrade. "Anyone with sense would have understood by now that we cannot be broken. The sensible would not have turned their back on the Emperor," Litanus retorted. "True," Heracles agreed, as the sounds of gunfire reaching him grew ever louder. "Then our duty is to punish them for their folly." Turning the corner, he engaged the bolter autofeeders in his guardian spear and ran a mental analysis of the Peacemaker's square. The approaches to it, sectors of fire, blind spots, and possible traps. Within seconds, the custodian reached the northern arch. From the passage, there erupted the clamour of battle and a veil of smoke, pierced by the flashes of muzzles. Heracles fell shoulder to shoulder with Artoris, noting to himself that his comrade's golden armour was sluiced with the blood of foes. "Glad to see you," said the latter, driving rounds into the traitor legionaries who advanced amid the park's burning trees. "World eaters!" Heracles spat with venom and opened fire as well. "Mad savages!" "Exactly so," echoed Litanus, taking his place in their improvised firing line. "Let us wipe them out." The Praetorians moved as one to meet the turncoats. Each bolt round from the custodians found its mark without fail. Each perfectly calculated step and sweep of a blade turned the assault of the treacherous berserkers back upon themselves. As blood lashed the air and Astartes' corpses thudded to the ground, Heracles felt a hard resolve within him. He understood that so long as a single custodian lived, the imperial palace would not fall. With the end of the heresy, the Legio Custodes, transformed into the Adeptus Custodes, were clothed in mourning, for they had suffered a shameful defeat. The warriors do not seek to forget it, and do not seek forgiveness, but even now they keep a vigil that is not broken for a single moment. For 100 centuries, the Adeptus Custodes have guarded the Golden Throne, and in that time no enemy has managed to penetrate the Sanctum Imperialis. The Praetorians perform many duties upon Terra. They guard not only the vast gates that lead to the Emperor's throne hall, but the whole expanse of the palace, which sprawls across an entire continent, and one may imagine how arduous such a task is. The imperial palace is a true labyrinth of bastions, cathedrals, armories, casemates, residential macro-complexes, halls of judgment, archives, sanctuaries, spaceports, and a countless multitude of other structures. Only the custodians decide who is granted audience with the Emperor, and few are honoured with such a boon. They patrol the palace halls, along which endless queues of petitioners wind, hunting out heretics or bearers of corruption who have by cunning slipped through the outer wards. The Adeptus Custodes also watch over the ritual of soul binding and the way in which thousands of psychers daily yield their life force in full, feeding the Emperor of Mankind and the Astronomicon. 10,000 more, in addition, guard the deepest underlevels of the palace, where relics of the dark age of technology lie hidden, capable of robbing a man of his sanity. The shield companies of the custodians regularly leave Holy Terra to test the defences of the Sol system or to destroy any, even the smallest, threat to the inviolability of the throne world. The Praetorians periodically hold blood games, during which one of the warriors, assuming the role of an attacker or an assassin, tests the defences of the palace complex to their limits and thereby helps to further strengthen them. For millennia, the Golden Guards have kept to a monotonous service, bound by traditions that have ossified into routine rites. Though the rest of the Imperium has been gripped by stagnation, and the Emperor's subjects over the centuries have come to regard the custodians with a mixture of reverent awe and superstitious worship, they have unfailingly driven out doubt and apathy, never yielding for a single instant to despair. The Praetorians scarcely notice the ordinary mortals scurrying at their feet, and unfailingly keep even the most devout space marines at spear's length. For he who has betrayed once may betray again. This mantra the Adeptus Custodes apply to themselves as well, and therefore they never permit even a moment's inattention or hesitation. For centuries, their Captain General has borne the title of one of the High Lords of Terra, or has served as their advisor, wielding enormous influence. In any case, the Emperor's bodyguards continue to exercise all the powers granted them by the Magisterium Lex Ultima. To this day, they govern Terra's defences as they see fit. In matters of physical and spiritual security and resolve, they answer to none but their silent master. The Heteron Guard Squad, the host of 300 custodians that guards the Emperor enthroned upon the Golden Throne, is so named. For such service, they are personally selected by the Captain General, who scrupulously assesses candidates by their accomplishments in training and battle, by discernment, strength of spirit, and a multitude of other factors. There is no task in the whole Imperium more important than the safeguarding of the Emperor of Mankind, and so, when composing the Heteron Guard, neither rank nor veteran status among the Praetorians is taken into account, and warriors whom younger or less experienced brothers have been chosen over do not deem themselves dishonoured. A guardian's vigil is unending. Although they are, of course, sometimes relieved for brief respite, the service remains hellishly arduous. Drawn up in ranks about the Golden Throne, the guards endure incomprehensibly long stretches of time. They stand motionless and silent, yet at the slightest sign of danger can instantaneously assume full combat readiness. Such tension is mentally and spiritually exhausting even to the demigods numbered among the 10,000. Therefore, should the Captain General judge that it is time for one of them to leave the ranks of the Heteron Guard, his decision is executed without delay, and the place of the designated warrior is taken by a fresh recruit. Again, this is no disgrace to a custodian, but merely a pragmatic acknowledgement that even heroes cannot indefinitely perform so enervating a duty. Praetorians who have served thus typically go on to enter the ranks of the stern bodyguards known as the aquilan shields. They protect the highest-ranking citizens of the Imperium, foremost the High Lords of Terra. They have had to safeguard the head of the Guild of Navigators, the chief logistician of the Adeptus Administratum, the Lord Militant of the Imperium, and even the secretive Magister of the Officio Assassinorum. All warriors of the 10,000 believe that the performance of such duties is implicit in their oath to the Master of Mankind, for in essence they stand between him and those whose lives are necessary for the successful governance of his dominions. Yet it is precisely because of this role that the aristocratic elite of Terra treat the custodians with special reverence. With a handful of custodians, the Emperor crushed the willful despots of the Long Night and brought Terra to heel. With a few hundred bodyguards, he secured the victory and crushed the uprising of the Thunder Warriors. Now there are 10,000 of us, and we are ready to strike across the galaxy. 10,000. Tell me, do you think your treacherous brothers have any chance of standing against us? A shield captain, Yortakarin Desmodages. If Space Marines can justly be called the sons of the primarchs, then the Adeptus Custodes are the scions of the Master of Mankind himself. His power suffuses the bodies of the Praetorians, and his blessings are so potent that they shield warriors from enemy assaults, both corporeal and of the immaterium. The exalted majesty of the Emperor of Mankind flows in the veins of the Golden Guardians, burns in their eyes, and seems to charge the very air about them, so that all soldiers true to him instinctively revere and fear these demigods of war. Only the trusted servants of the Imperial Palace know the method by which such outstanding warriors are made. That process is carried out by the most skilled bioalchemists of Terra, who toil in magnificent laboratories hidden from the sight of the rest of mankind. Because the Custodes fight only for the Emperor, answer only to him and obey no other, the methods by which their ranks are replenished are not disclosed, and not even the High Lords of Terra may obtain that knowledge. It is known that every Praetorian was once an ordinary infant in one of the noble houses of the throne world. To give one's child to the most glorious service in the Imperium is an unthinkable honour, and many of Terra's prominent clans would voluntarily surrender nearly all their newborns to obtain it. The genetic transformation of candidates begins while they are still in early childhood. The earlier one commences the forging of an Adeptus Custodes warrior, the higher the chances of success. During such selections, immense crowds gather upon the avenue of sacrifice beyond the gates of the Ascended. The spectators pray with rapture and greet with jubilant cries the worthy scions of Terra's high society who march past, basking in the adoration of the masses, and at the end of the procession hand their heirs over for all time to the Emperor's care. There is a reason why the complement of the Adeptus Custodes, despite their impressive longevity, has never exceeded roughly 10,000. Put simply, for every worthy aspirant who becomes a guard of the Golden Throne, there are many hundreds who fail. Space Marines are engineered by the implantation of gene seed and auxiliary organs that transmute their hosts into living weapons. With the Custodians, it is otherwise. It is unknown what mysterious bioalchemy initiates their metamorphoses, but they occur on a far deeper level, within the candidate's cells, and perhaps within his very soul. The exaltation of candidates unfolds not only upon the physical and the spiritual planes. Prospective members of the Brotherhood of the Custodes undergo exhaustive mental preparation. Their reason is reconstructed from the ground up, and the very architecture of their consciousness is bolstered, as were the walls of the imperial palace after Horus's betrayal, until the candidate's mind either becomes an impregnable citadel or collapses under its own weight. All recruits endure sessions of mnemonic conditioning and psychological refinement, thousands of hours in the aggregate, a process whose relentlessness is its own deadly efficiency. Information is literally hammered into the applicant's brains like a die upon metal, so swiftly and so brutally that many of them are driven mad. A custodian must not only master every aspect of military science, including assassin tradecraft, counterintelligence techniques, the rules of threat recognition, and every method known to humanity for eliminating an opponent, but must also acquire knowledge in disciplines unnecessary to ordinary bodyguards. The Praetorians are required, with painstaking scrupulousness, to study diplomacy and the principles of statecraft, stellar navigation, stellar cartography, history, philosophy, theosophy, the arts, and a multitude of other subjects. This approach to education has been preserved from an age when the Golden Guards not only protected the Emperor, but served him as counselors and wise interlocutors. Today, candidates are trained more from tradition than necessity, observing formalities, yet the advantages of such preparation are manifest. The deluge of information not only weeds out those recruits whose minds lack sufficient strength, it also, by virtue of the custom, leaves the Adeptus Custodes an enlightened body with a broad outlook. Such erudition was commonplace during the Great Crusade, but has become a rare exception in the current age of fear and ignorance. The custodian's knowledge is their privilege, a privilege that underscores the depth of the Imperium's decay. To the credit of the Golden Guards, they do not sink into despondency for that reason. For the custodians, there are no forbidden knowledges. To perform their duty to the utmost, they must command all information regarding the dreadful dark powers that seek to seize the galaxy. Moreover, by revealing to candidates truths capable of unmaking a man's reason, their instructors quickly discern which recruits are insufficiently strong of spirit. Any recruit who endures such a trial not only comes to a firm understanding of the profound meaning and consequences of the war for possession of the Emperor, but also understands why no one outside the circle of 10,000 should be privy to such matters. No one among those who dwell behind the walls of the imperial palace knows how protracted the process of creating the Custodes truly is. In any case, those who survive it are transfigured into majestic Praetorians, their bodies and minds utterly remade. Nothing of the former personality remains, and thus new members of the Brotherhood assume names drawn from the legends of heroes, monsters, and gods of ancient Terra. Such a tradition is entirely in keeping with the superhuman nature of the Custodes, and, moreover, allows the aristocratic houses of the throne world to avoid humiliation. Each clan may claim that its scion possess the valor to become a bodyguard of the emperor, and no one can gainsay them. The noble houses act accordingly. Although the minds of the Custodes are shielded from the baleful influence of sorcerers and psychers, they themselves possess no warp abilities. The Emperor of Mankind would brook no weakness in the mental defense of his Praetorians, and battle psychers are a potent but unreliable instrument. Denizens of the warp can bend other minds, but for the Adeptus Custodes, no such risk exists. The worthiest candidates who survive the trials and are inducted into the Golden Legion at once earn the respect of their new brethren. Within the ranks of the Emperor's bodyguards, there are no elders or juniors, only immaculate warriors who understand the grave responsibility that accompanies their strength and authority. A custodian's valiant deeds are reflected in the length of his name. At first, it contains only a single epithet, but with each feat performed by a Praetorian, a new component is appended. In the distant past, the naming was performed by the Emperor himself. Now, a brother's achievement is marked by the Captain General, or, in certain cases, by a shield captain upon the field of battle. Golden Guards, who have served for many centuries, commonly bear dozens of names engraved on the reverse of their armour plates and sometimes etched in microscopic letters upon their bones. Along with the new name, the recruit of the Adeptus Custodes receives his personal equipment. In the gilded towers of Terra dwell entire dynasties of supremely skilled artisans charged with crafting the armour and impeccably balanced weapons for each of the 10,000. Clan Halbrenmere, in particular, has become renowned for masterpieces of wargear. Their craftsmen produce veritable works of military art. Moreover, the Adeptus Custodes possess access to a most lavish arsenal of technological devices, many of which were wrought millennia ago. All forms of the Golden Legion's war machines and equipment are verily consummate. Their outstanding quality, proven upon the fields of battle, is embodied in the sleek Dawn Eagle model jet bikes, in the peerless Alarus pattern Terminator armour, and in the Land Raiders and Contemptor dreadnoughts that fought even in the days of the Great Crusade. The weapons of war with which the bodyguards of the Emperor of Mankind are equipped never fail or falter, for they are hand-assembled by the Imperium's most gifted artisans. The servicing of their gear is carried out to the most exacting standards befitting defenders of the Golden Throne, and weaknesses or vulnerabilities are unacceptable. Given the incredible kit of the Custodes, their regimes of endless training, their years-long holographic campaigns, and the secret-shrouded conflicts in which the Praetorians fight in the Emperor's name across the Sol system and far beyond, it is little wonder that the 10,000 are the Imperium's finest military organization. In fact, the Adeptus Custodes are immortal. But even they weaken sooner or later. Some receive wounds that render a guardian unfit to perform his duty. Thus, warriors with lost limbs, artificial eyes, or augmetic organs are no longer physically perfect. Others notice that their mental faculties are deteriorating. Not by much, perhaps, but still enough to affect reaction speed, memory, or attentiveness. For most Imperial fighters, a reduction in the speed of strikes when attacking or parrying by 1/10 of a second matters little. However, in the case of the Praetorians, such a shortfall marks that their watch has come to an end. When a custodian decides he is no longer fit for service, he leaves all his kit in the armoury, dons a black hooded robe, and slips away into the boundless void of the galaxy. Such noble exiles, however, continue to guard the Emperor of Mankind. Wandering, they keep vigil. Some of them work alone, prowling like grim, sinister shadows in the dark corners of the Emperor's dominions. Others, conversely, establish networks of informers and agents, employing fear and intimidation to secure obedience where loyalty and honor prove insufficient. Upon learning of a potential threat to Terra and the Emperor of mankind, these sentinels send a warning to the Captain General via secret channels. Forewarned of danger by the Emperor's eyes, contingents of the Adeptus Custodes carry out punitive operations across the galaxy that often eliminate the threat at its root. The Imperial Palace on the Throne World is the largest and most impregnable defensive complex in the Imperium. Covering an entire mountain range, it stretches for thousands of kilometers across the surface of Terra. The safety of this colossal bastion is the responsibility of the Adeptus Custodes, and they perform their duty with tireless diligence. Even in the era of the Great Crusade, the palace was an unprecedented wonder of engineering. The ensuing years brought irrevocable changes. At first, its magnificent architecture had to be sacrificed so that the complex could withstand the sieges of Horus's armies, and the battle with the treacherous hordes of the War Master resulted in cataclysmic destruction. After the end of the heresy, the Emperor's halls were, in effect, rebuilt, now as the greatest fortress in the history of mankind. Over the last 100 centuries, it has constantly spread outward and upward, gradually sinking into the mire. The former austere contours of the palace are now buried beneath layers of Gothic ornamentation and the crude monumental creations of the cult imperialis. What was once a light, delightful edifice has become a massive, ungainly exemplar of terrifying architecture, one that flaunts its martial might as if to dare the nightmares that prowl the dark void. Its fate is perhaps the clearest metaphor for what has befallen the entire Imperium. Yet, although the palace has become an ornate mockery of its former self, the Custodes continue to guard it with unerring fidelity, and that is no easy task. The perimeter of the palace's outer walls stretches for thousands of kilometers. The colossal spires of its residential macro-complexes and cosmoports pierce the upper layers of the atmosphere and thrust into the void like the quills of some luminescent-skinned beast. Sublevels plunge deep into Terra's sacred crust, in places descending for hundreds of miles. There are no documents in the archives that enumerate all the endless halls, corridors, vaults, bastions, and plazas of the palace. Behind its curtains dwell national communities, territorial clans, and tech-urban tribes of servitors sufficient to populate several planetary systems. Nevertheless, the Adeptus Custodes provide the security of the entire complex. It is they who patrol the colossal, seemingly endless walls, stand sentinel at arsenals and shrines, guard the pilgrim routes, the famed cosmoports, and the gigantic fortifications. The Praetorians inspect orbital guns and orbital installations, whose batteries extend for many kilometers, and vigilantly watch over the crypts in the palace's depths, where secrets so terrible are hidden that their exposure would mean the annihilation of humanity. Yet the Golden Legion has both the warriors and the resolve to undertake these and many other tasks. For millennia, the Custodes shield hosts, assembling without fanfare aboard requisition starships, have been sent forth to exterminate threats noted by the Emperor's prowling eyes in the void. Moreover, detachments of Praetorians regularly patrol the Sol system, relieving comrades in garrisons of military bases in the orbits of Luna, Venus, Pluto, and the numerous stellar citadels in deep space that guard the approaches to Terra. It is also known that the Adeptus Custodes have long-standing ties with the Imperial Fist chapter. Those Astartes still assist the Golden Legion in safeguarding the approaches to the system. Their giant star fort, the Phalanx, has often taken station in defensive orbit above the throne world. The Custodes have steadfastly fulfilled their duty for tens of centuries. Now, as darkness envelops the galaxy around them and they are forced to fight in ever-new wars, the Praetorians defend both the Imperial Palace and all of Terra with a determination hitherto unseen. Days before the long-looming storm broke and the great rift cleaved the galaxy in two, a bright light of hope flared within the star empire of Ultramar. By a great sacrifice and an almost supernatural intervention, Guilliman, primarch of the Ultramarines, long poised at death's brink, was restored to life. His return set into motion monumental change. When the traitor legions besieged the Imperial Palace in the decisive battles of the Horus heresy, Primarch Guilliman and his legionaries had been too distant from Terra to come to the Emperor's aid. It is not impossible that the fate of the galaxy might have been otherwise had he been present at that contest. Be that as it may, the reborn Guilliman resolved that such an omission would never recur. Perceiving that darkness threatened to drown the whole Imperium, he made the desperate decision to embark upon a crusade that, by means both unprecedented and bloody, led him across the stars to the throne world itself. There, Guilliman was received with honour. Aquila, Commander Callum Varanor, granted him an audience with the Emperor, after which the Assembly of the High Lords of Terra restored Guilliman to the office of Lord Commander of the Imperium. Although the returned Primarch outwardly retained his austere majesty, inwardly he was shaken by the condition of his father's domains. To blunt the onslaught of the Chaos hordes, Guilliman at once set about reforms, discarding without hesitation the stubbornness and ossified principles of the bureaucrats of Adeptus Terra. The Primarch had been resurrected at the most opportune moment. Scarcely had his labours begun when an avalanche of fury, disgorged by the Great Rift, slammed into the Sol system. Though the throne world itself did not fall under the sway of warp storms, it was lashed by shockwaves of tumult that temporarily obscured the beam of the Astronomicon. Terra writhed from its highest spires to its deepest vaults, in confusion and despair. The Golden Legion was forced to quell riots, to crush the uprisings of doomsday prophets and their cults, and to slay maddened mobs of supplicants driven into insanity and cannibalism. Detachments of the Adeptus Custodes waged an unending fight in the shadowed casemates beneath the palace, where ancient horrors burst free from their chambers after runic wards burned away. But worse lay yet in wait. Seeking to deliver a final, ruinous blow to the Imperium, vast hordes of Khorne's demons tore through the fabric of reality and surged at the Lion Gates. Screaming things advanced upon the palace like a crimson tide, and a savage battle boiled. Battleship-sized gun emplacements placed beside the Lion Gates punched blazing maws through the ranks of the infernal host, but they could not win the day alone. Then the combined forces of the Adeptus Custodes, the Ultramarines, and the Sisters of Silence, led by Guilliman and Captain General Trajan Valoris, strode forth to meet the demonic tide. They confronted the enemy at the walls of the Imperial Palace. The scenes of battle recalled the horrors of Terra's ancient siege, 1,000 millennia past. The Praetorians once more crossed blades with the frenzied butchers of the blood god. Yet now, at the head of the Adeptus Custodes army, stood some of the Imperium's greatest heroes. Fiercely determined to prevent a repetition of that old failure, they therefore prevailed. 8 blood-hungry commanders led the assault, but the warriors of the Emperor of Mankind cut them down or tore them to pieces one by one. The Golden Guardians likewise suffered grievous losses. Many noble defenders of the Emperor, who had watched over him for millennia, fell beneath the blows of the bronze axes wielded by the hated spawn of Khorne. And yet, although the very heavens boiled with blood-red clouds that poured a scarlet rain upon the earth, the legions of the god of fury gradually faded from being, howling with rage and frustration. After the storming of the Lion Gates, the brutal truth became plain. Although the Inquisition arrested and executed great numbers of battle witnesses and strove to destroy all traces of the engagement, the lords of the Adeptus Custodes officially acknowledged that they could no longer guarantee Terra's security without adopting special preemptive measures. If the servants of the dark gods had breached the defences of the cradle of humanity once, they could do so again. Thus Valoris and Guilliman, meeting behind closed doors, safeguarded by elaborate wards and layers of psi screens, discussed an amendment to the standing of the Adeptus Custodes. Of course, they were not relieved of palace guard duty, and their brethren remained on watch within the Emperor's throne halls. But, as followed logically from the oaths sworn by the Praetorians, they agreed to enlarge the scope of their responsibilities far beyond the Sol system. Since that time, ever greater numbers of shield hosts departed Terra on expeditions, guided by alpha-level intercepts, the prophecies of the oracles, and the transmissions of the eyes of the Emperor, which continued their work. The purpose of these formations was to root out the most dangerous threats to the existence of the Emperor of mankind. In executing these missions, they ranged across the galaxy, even into the darkness of the Imperium Nihilus, and unfailingly tended to the inviolability of the throne world. To that end, several shield companies accompanied the Indomitus Crusade, aiding Guilliman as emissaries of the Emperor. They delivered to besieged Space Marine chapters reinforcements from the Primaris Astartes and the technologies for their creation. By their presence, the Custodes signified that a gift had arrived from the Emperor of mankind himself, and to refuse or neglect such an offering was intolerable. Other shield companies took up permanent garrison at defensive bases on the outer reaches of the Sol system. Still others pushed further out to guard key warp routes to Terra that yet retained stability. Some Guardians were tasked with special missions, and now they hunt heretics, seek artifacts vital to the Imperium's survival, or, redoubling their efforts, fight a covert war against humanity's hidden enemies. Never since the Great Crusade had so many custodians been deployed beyond Terra. To an outsider, the structure of the Adeptus Custodes appears labyrinthine. To other imperial authorities before whom the Golden Legion will occasionally deign to report, its hierarchy seems needlessly convoluted. This is partly the result of tradition and partly of secrecy. In truth, however, the forces of the Adeptus Custodes are organized according to a robust and tactically supple scheme. The Emperor's Guards, as a martial formation, constitute an army of unparalleled warriors, each one standing above any representative of any other human institution. No agent of the Imperium is empowered to command the Custodes. Even figures as exalted as the members of the Council of Terra and Lord Commander Guilliman may only petition the Praetorians for aid, not compel them. As befits a brotherhood of elite warriors, the internal hierarchy of the Adeptus Custodes is starkly transparent. They are led by the Captain General. This office passed from one valiant commander to another across millennia since the mysterious disappearance of Constantine Valdor. Such a leader wields absolute authority over the Golden Guards, acts as the ceremonial deputy of the Emperor himself, and speaks in the name of the Emperor of mankind. One tier below stands the Tribunate of the Custodes, a council of 10 veterans of the Golden Legion who serve as the Captain General's advisors. Its membership is regularly refreshed to ensure a blend of wisdom, experience, and fresh perspective. Only a Praetorian who has been granted no fewer than 10 names and who has led his brothers to victory in battle at least 3 times may be admitted to the tribunate. The minimum term of service within this body is 10 years, and the warrior spends those years removed from the front line, devoting the full resources of his formidable intellect to supporting the Captain General in matters of strategy and diplomacy. On the rung below the ruling council stand the shield captains, gifted commanders of unswerving heroism who lead their fellows into battle. The various titles borne by these officers, from Supreme Castellans and Aquila Commander to Chief Wardens, are frequently determined by their specific responsibilities. It is the shield captains who head the custodians in the conduct of operations. As a rule, one of them assumes overall command of an operation, while several others sustain their colleague with skill and counsel. All other custodians are, in essence, equal and are divided into informal brotherhoods. When choosing a particular fraternity, a guardian is guided by the strategic function allotted to him within the 10,000. Wherever the Custodes fight, among the ranks of the Virtus Praetors on swift jet bikes, within the heavy assault detachments of the Alarus, or alongside the unyielding wardens, his brothers in arms bestow upon him precisely those honours they deem fitting to his deeds. The Golden Legion differs from the vast majority of the Imperium's other military organisations in that its forces do not possess a rigidly prescribed organisational hierarchy. To accomplish assigned tasks, the commanding officer of a Custodes grouping has the discretion to select almost at will virtually any warriors and materiel, adhering only to the most general requirements for the formation of detachments. An individual Adeptus Custodes warband is called a shield company. The size of such a formation may vary, for the shield captain selects his warriors each time for the demands of the specific mission. He may assemble a mere handful of Praetorians, or he may muster an imposing army reinforced with jet bikes, tanks, and dreadnoughts. Under ordinary circumstances, a shield company numbers 30 to 40 custodians under the command of a single shield captain. If a larger concentration is required, several such detachments are united into a shield host. This formation, consisting of dozens or even hundreds of Golden Guardians under the authority of conclaves of shield captains, possesses the power to crush any enemy host and subjugate an entire star system. Such overwhelming force is gathered only in exceptional cases, when no other armed organization of the Imperium can be entrusted with the operation. Then the host marches to war to execute, with unswerving resolve, the will of the Emperor of mankind. Typically, a shield host is led by several shield captains, aided by the sage council of vexillous praetors, whereas a company remains under the command of a single shield captain, although in some instances he is assisted by several particularly distinguished warriors. Forces and means of support temporarily assigned to a shield company include armoured vehicles, dreadnoughts, and warships attached to the detachment. All auxiliary forces and resources apportioned by a shield host to its constituent shield companies form the so-called auxilia maximus. In practice, however, they invariably fight alongside their parent shield companies. As an example of a shield host, one may cite the Solar Furies, who were first mustered at the end of the 36th millennium to contend with Necrons that had awakened upon a world alarmingly close to Terra. Since that time, the detachments of this host have fought together many times. As a rule, they are convened to confront threats that suddenly arise near the Sol system or within it. It is important to note that the Solar Furies constitute an exceptionally large formation. A shield host is ordinarily any formation comprising 2 or more shield companies under the command of multiple shield captains. Within the bowels of the palace are sealed incarnate nightmares, supernatural horrors from the depths of the long night, capable of wiping the Imperium from existence without leaving a trace. It is the duty of the Shadowkeeper's shield host to guard them unto the end of time. These custodians have been entrusted with the keys to the sealed gates hidden in the dungeons of the Imperial Palace. Only the Shadowkeepers know how to open the runic locks, shatter the wards, and pass the sacred circles. And only they know that neither the one, nor the other, nor a third possibility may be permitted, for in the dungeons there is something so monstrous that should it break free, it would threaten all humanity with madness. The burden of that grievous watch has been entrusted to an entire shield host. More than 100 Praetorians patrol the unlit, silent corridors, vigilantly guarding the dread legacy of the Age of Strife. Most mortals would lose their wits performing such a task. Though no sound issues from the forbidden chambers and nothing can be seen beyond the doors, the very air in those passages is saturated with an atmosphere of terror, and from the constant presence of evil, the shadows congeal and crawl along the walls. Even the superhuman warriors of the Adeptus Custodes feel ill at ease in those grim stone vaults, for they are never rid of an inexplicable sense of menace. The fact that the Shadowkeepers perform their duty impeccably, sometimes without relief for decades on end, speaks volumes about their discipline and spiritual fortitude. Many custodians are counted among that shield host, for their protective oaths help the fighters fix their minds upon the single task and forsake all else. The commanders of these sinister sentinels are armed with ancient weapons of mysterious origin, instruments permitted to be used only as a last resort should anything be loosed from the dungeons. For 10,000 years, the Shadowkeepers fulfilled their duty successfully, but with the coming of the Great Rift, everything changed. Raw chaos energies seethed among the stars, and spawn of the past, never before seen, burst into the light. Worse still, some chambers abruptly lay empty, some unclean force abducted the artifacts and entities contained therein, and now they again scourge the galaxy. Fearing what would happen if the terrible relics of the Age of Strife fell into the wrong hands, detachments of the shield host at last departed the bounds of Terra. These custodians must seize what has no place in the Imperium, exterminate all who stand in their path, and return the loathsome trophies to the chambers where they ought to remain. Over the centuries, many shield captains have been appointed commanders of the Shadowkeepers. With the office, they received the title Loquidan, which remains with the custodian for life and confers upon him the profound respect of his brethren. Such a warrior must be the most attentive of sentinels, the most sleepless and vigilant overseer on Terra. Moreover, should any creature or relic vanish from the vaults, or should a new threat arise that must be imprisoned in the palace casemates, duty will require the Loquidan to lead the operation in person. At present, the post is held by Shield Captain Borsa Thirsk, who has served in that capacity for a century and a half. He is a stern and fearsome warrior, utterly dauntless, unyielding, and ever watchful, the perfect Lockwarden. Before the galactic storm broke, Thirsk left Terra only twice. Since the opening of the Great Rift, he is seldom on the planet, which speaks more eloquently than any words of the catastrophic state of the Imperium. Custodian Jehal Feldorus Gau, one of the Shadowkeepers, an unbending warrior with a stern gaze. The sombre hue of his armour calls to mind the twilight of dungeons, while the rich crimson of his left pauldron marks his belonging to the shield host. Praetorian Gau kept watch over the hidden casemates for 17 years, during which he left Terra 3 times to fulfill particularly secret missions of retrieval. It was Jehal's blade that felled the slithering dreamer on Tarnus 4, and that joyless success was commemorated by the new names carved upon the inner surfaces of the guards' plates. In the performance of the duty to defend the Emperor, we are not confined to the walls of his palace. Our war is like an eternal game of regicide, played concurrently upon countless boards against an endless multitude of foes. In such a contest, one must ever exercise cunning, act in advance, and seize the initiative at the earliest opportunity. We must see as far ahead as possible and execute every move without fault. The smallest error will bring about final defeat. Captain General Trajan Valoris. When the palace's harbingers of doom study the currents of the Empyrean, searching for signs of coming calamity, they also mark those individuals who, by personal example, thought or deed, are able to avert catastrophe before the Golden Throne itself stands threatened. Such fateful personages receive a particular honour. They are taken under the protection of the aquilan shields. Thus, a small detachment of custodians ensures the survival of a military or spiritual leader who aids the cause of the Emperor's defence. The aquilan shields are an unofficial brotherhood composed of warriors drawn from various contingents of the 10,000. Customarily, the bodyguards assemble in small groups, and having traversed the stellar ocean, arrive at their wards wherever they may be. Custodians dispatch no notices and seek no permissions. They appear as if from nowhere, incarnations of the Emperor's will, and announce that this or that person is henceforth under the aegis of the Emperor of mankind. It is an honour from which the chosen cannot decline, whatever their station in life. The sentinels of this shield host have guarded members of the Council of Terra, Lord Inquisitors, commanders of the Astra Militarum, and captains of the Space Marines. They even once sheltered 2 leaders of crusades who bore the title Magister of War, yet the aquilan shields showed restraint, disregarding the historical associations with the first to hold such a title. But custodians have also manifested in bursts of golden light upon the front, protecting with their blades eloquent preachers, militia commanders who stood aghast, and other ostensibly insignificant persons. They are bound by one common expectation, that under the vigilant gaze of the Emperor's own bodyguards, these people will achieve prodigious success in the defence of the throne world. The Custodes fight for them so that the foretold future may come to pass, and they will rescue their wards from any threat until those wards' potential is exhausted. At that moment, the warriors depart without a single word, leaving the chosen to fend for their own lives. Often this ends badly, but the aquilan shields no longer concern themselves with such matters, unless, of course, a threat to the security of the Golden Throne should arise. Tora Makis Ossian, a custodian who has fought in the ranks of the aquilan shields for more than 4 centuries, bears the royal purple on his left pauldron and vestments as a mark of his allegiance. During his service in that brotherhood, Ossian saved Arch-Cardinal Mumbres from demonic assassins, stood guard over High Lord Vane during the Red Razor uprisings, and shielded from the horrors of the war for Finalium a young preacher named Lorin, astonished by such honours. In the end, the selfless youth performed an act of martyrdom and was exalted to sainthood, an event that altered the course of the campaign across the sector. The Dread Host is a staggeringly powerful army. It comprises hundreds of Custodes, arrayed into numerous shield hosts that voyage aboard the Moi raids, 3 warships built before the heresy. The purpose of this army is simple: to deal with the Emperor's enemies, embodying his wrath and his justice. This formation does not employ lightning raids, nor wage clandestine wars or protracted defensive campaigns. Instead, the shield captains of the Dread Host, in their councils, identify the most obvious and grave threats to Segmentum Solar, and then eradicate those enemies so remorselessly that the echoes of their ferocious engagements reverberate even through the warp. Sometimes a single starship is dispatched to the objective, at times 2. Since the founding of the Imperium, only on a few occasions have all 3 Moi raids been sent against a foe. In any event, the outcome of such encounters is always the same. The Golden Guards, at whose vanguard dozens of Alarus custodians advance, smite their foes with crushing assaults. They cut down enemy soldiery and rend their war machines to pieces. They overthrow false idols and consign them to the flames. They raze unyielding cities, scorch enemy fortresses, and exterminate foes' allies and followers. By horrific example, they demonstrate what befalls those who dare challenge the dominion of the Emperor. They pay no heed to attempts at surrender and allow no one to flee. And when the Dread Host concludes its war, nothing of the victims remains save ghastly tales of merciless execution wrought by the hand of the Master of Mankind. They shattered Orc-War, obliterated entire star systems consumed by rebellion, and routed the crusades of traitors. They met enemies who outnumbered them by the thousands and prevailed through superiority in tactical mastery, swiftness, and strength. In every campaign, this host demonstrates the terrible wrath of the Emperor. Ruthless bloodletting, utter annihilation, these are the lessons by which they snuff out even the thought of possible revolt or invasion. The fortress in which the Dread Host is quartered towers over an entire precinct of the palace. This fortified bastion is lit by vast electric bowl lamps and arc lumens, angled so as to backlight 500 colossal sculptures of eagles arrayed along the upper parapet walls. From certain angles, the sinister statues, each the size of a super-heavy tank, appear to stand sentinel over the world. Many of the birds gaze upward toward the starry ocean. The rest look down upon the thronged ceremonial avenues below. Many superstitious souls believe that the eagles upon the shrine can discern treachery wherever it hides, and that through the sockets of the carvings the Emperor himself peers, seeking darkness in human hearts. In a sense, this is true. Within each statue is embedded a complex of long-range augurs, servitor-cogitator modules, and multiband eavesdropping devices that stream feeds into the info chapels of the Citadel. Using this intelligence, the Dread Host identifies dangerous enemies of the Golden Throne who must be destroyed. The Custodian, Calisarian, Tristraean Desh has not served in the Dread Host as long as his battle brethren, yet in that time he has seen 2 separate theatres of war by galactic reckoning, each a scant distance from Terra. During the clearance on Cormium, the Praetorian mercilessly cut down almost 2,500 renegade guardsmen. In the battle for the Corvinium mines of Triton, he ran his blade through the Genestealer Patriarch, and the life of the dread lord of that ruinous cult was ended. Desh wears with pride a funeral black pauldron and white terriges, the insignia of his shield host, one of those that presently compose the Dread Host. Among humanity's stellar dominions, the Sol system is one of the most heavily defended. To the Adeptus Custodes, its planets, orbital fortresses and transit routes are extensions of their Lord's palace, and thus demand vigilant protection. In the native star system of mankind, there are hundreds of military bases, from the vast orbital bastions of Luna to the cloud-guarded outposts of Jupiter and the deep space battle stations in the Halo Belt. Billions of guns glare into the dark reaches of the galaxy, ready to crush any who would dare to assail the center of the Imperium's power. Over every interplanetary thoroughfare loom armor-clad towers and gargoyle-adorned bastions, warded against the unholy machinations of the Imperium's manifold foes. Entire armadas of the Imperial Navy ply these lanes, seeking out the slightest threat. And yet, for Terra, there is perhaps no more reliable line of outer defense than the custodians of the Solar Watch. The warriors of this formation, comprised of several shield companies of varying strength, are sworn to guard the remote bulwarks of the throne world. These Praetorians hold themselves to be the palace's first true line of fortification. They consider it their duty to admit no threat to Terra from without, and therefore continuously patrol the routes between void-born objects and planets in Sol space, never relaxing their vigilance for a single second. Although the Solar Watch mostly embarks aboard vessels of the Imperial Navy and interstellar merchantmen, it possesses an impressive fleet of venerable land raiders and generally relies predominantly on mechanized formations. Thanks to this, the Praetorians are able to respond rapidly to a potentially dangerous situation and sweep aside foes by means of overwhelming force. Serious threats to the Sol system are uncommon, but they do arise. Thus, the Custodians have played a key role in rooting out chaos cults, preventing inquisitorial coups, and combating insidious Xenos infiltrations on every planet save Mars. Formally, the remit of the Golden Guard extends even to the redoubts of the tech priests, but the Adeptus Custodes are shrewd enough not to ruin relations with the servants of the Omnissiah. The warriors visit Mars only rarely, trusting the adepts of the cult Mechanicus to deal with local malefactors themselves. The Captain General, favouring an active defence, from time to time tasks the Solar Watch with so-called Talon sorties, assembling for such raids a formation numbering a shield company, which strikes at the most dangerous foes in the star systems nearest to Terra. The Solar Watch does not expend resources on assaults in battle zones where substantial Imperial forces are already operating. These custodians prefer to destroy a threat in its infancy or to exterminate enemies who have broken through other lines of humanity's defense. Embarked in venerable land raiders, the Praetorians plunge into the enemy in swift armoured spearheads. First and foremost, the Golden Guard cut down enemy commanders and the most potent creatures or war machines. Having deprived the enemy army of the ability to continue its conquests, the Solar Watch withdraws suddenly, and the final mopping up falls to the regular forces of the Imperium. It is hardly surprising. The tasks of guarding the Sol system are vital, and the custodians cannot long abandon their posts. Pidnoris Caligus fights for the Solar Watch and bears the heraldic colours of the formation, marble white and red. The veteran ensures that his comrades miss no detail or advantage in battle and give the enemy not even a second's respite. His colleagues and the fighters of his detachment boarded heavy tonnage barges secretly transporting cultists and subjected to decimation the garrisons of orbital platforms that had shown dereliction in their duties. During the expedition to Iorlos under the command of Shield Captain Thetis, it was these custodians who cut down a cabal of Xenos flesh witches, preventing the Xenos from committing atrocities aimed at the Golden Throne. The Emperor of Mankind has long been fixed upon the Golden Throne, yet some of the 10,000 warriors claim that they hear the voice of their Lord during meditation, or feel his hand guiding them. The other Custodes do not regard such events as interference from on high, for they have never worshipped the Emperor as a god. The Custodes are convinced that the indomitable will of the Emperor of mankind, dwelling within a mutilated body, concerns them, and that he issues directives to his bodyguards as he did in the days when he still fought at their side. The Praetorians, who sense this bond with the Emperor of mankind more keenly than any, become emissaries imperatus. Gathered into conclaves, they, by means of debate and deep reflection, interpret the possible desires of their sovereign. With the tacit consent of the Captain General, these guardians carry to imperial commanders missives from the Emperor of mankind, or in some cases retrieve from the palace vaults some ancient device, which they then hand to that champion of humanity best suited to make use of the relic. Dispatches from the Custodes have altered the courses of entire crusades. By their guidance, the Emperor's servants have removed threats or uncovered caches of archaeotech that would otherwise have escaped human notice. Emissaries imperatus have peered beyond Terra for millennia, though only rarely and in small numbers. Now, however, after the return of the Primarch and the beginning of the Indomitus Crusade, those Praetorians have grown markedly more active. When the Primarch announced his intention to entrust loyal chapters of the Space Marines with the secrets of creating Astartes Primaris, his plan met with some resistance from the Adeptus Custodes, who feared the excessive empowerment of those who had once risen up against the Emperor and might rebel anew. Dozens of emissaries imperatus intervened, asserting that such was the will of the Emperor of mankind. They accompanied Guilliman on crusade, and many among them, having adopted the role of Virtus Praetors, mounted jet bikes to deliver news of reinforcements to besieged chapters with all possible speed. Moreover, the mere presence of the Custodes compelled even the most orthodox chapters to accept Primaris warriors into their ranks. No one will spurn a gift extended by the hand of the Emperor of mankind. Archimalus Tychor became an emissary imperatus more than 1,000 years ago. He proudly wears grey-white vestments with a red pauldron, the heraldry of his shield company. It was Tychor's intimations sent to him by the Emperor that guided the sacred mission Gamma Hades, executed by the Adeptus Mechanicus, to an archaeotech cache. It was Archimalus's blade that felled the dozens of massive orcs who reached that planet's treasures first. After his return to Terra shortly before the Great Rift opened, the warriors of his detachment were among the first to voice support for the Indomitus Crusade. Once a full-scale invasion of Terra was considered utterly unthinkable. With the coming of the Great Rift, that age passed into history. Today, the Sol system can boast some of the most formidable fortifications in the galaxy, where garrisons of resolute warriors stand under the protection of both technology and faith. And yet, the defense of the throne world rests, first and foremost, upon the Adeptus Custodes. If any bold or reckless invader draws near the borders of the Sol system, their fleet will be struck before it can even pass Mandeville Point. There, in the asteroid belt, colossal space fortresses lie at anchor, manned by specialized regiments of the Astra Militarum. The system's outer reaches are further sealed by 1,000-kilometer fields of void mines, between which prowl monitor vessels and vast servitor hunters of an intimidating aspect hardened against the ravages of the vacuum. Should an invading force break through such a screen, it will find that resistance only intensifies the deeper it presses into the system. Powerful patrols of the battle fleet, composed of starships from the line fleet Solar, streak through the darkness, and their angular silhouettes herald death to any who come within their sights. The gloom is studded with watch chapels, citadel docks, fighter bases, and countless gun platforms, their shipboard luminance shining like artificed constellations. The Grey Knights, the Inquisition, the Adeptus Mechanicus, each maintains fortifications in the Sol system, bristling with formidable defensive forces. Moreover, according to the Edict of the Throne World signed by Guilliman, Terra and the worlds neighbouring her have been granted the right to raise numerous armies for self-defence. Consider, too, the ceaseless efforts of the Solar Watch and the presence in geostationary orbit of the Phalanx, the indomitable battle station of the Imperial Fists, and it becomes plain that the Sol system is virtually impregnable to hostile armies. Yet there exist less obvious threats to the Golden Throne, the emergence of which the Adeptus Custodes must watch with particular vigilance. From every corner of the Imperium, an endless tide of pilgrims, merchants, functionaries, adepts, fanatics, emissaries, refugees, and an innumerable multitude of others flows toward Terra. Each day, thousands of vessels exit the warp, following strictly assigned approach vectors to Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Luna, and the Throne World itself. Every planet and satellite in the Sol system is ringed with habitation and docking platforms, and any body with sufficiently solid ground is built over with colossal hab blocks, manufactorums and fortifications the size of cities. An inexhaustible human river pours along the space lanes, and people press upon one another at every turn. Under such conditions, sedition and heresy inevitably bloom. And of course, it falls to the Inquisition to eradicate them, a task to which some of the most zealous agents dedicate their lives. Nevertheless, even the most devout servants of the Imperium can succumb to corruption, whether in the shape of nihilistic ideologies, chaos infestation, or the living magnetism of xeno-fanatics. For this reason, the Adeptus Custodes maintain a constant presence in the Sol system, patrolling and sweeping it with their own forces. The Golden Legion controls the issuance of passes to the uncountable Imperial citizens who daily transit Terra's gargantuan cosmports, and it conducts sudden inspections of the lines of void defence. The Custodes do not adhere to any strict pattern or timetable, but instead follow only their own intuition, so that none may foretell their actions and slip away. Furthermore, the Adeptus Custodes plants listening devices, servitor spies, and information-stealing subroutines within the Throne World's hives and other planets. The Praetorians gather and analyze fragments of information obtained even from the darkest corners of the system of Sol, feeding macro-cogitators the size of a battleship with data on population movements and work shift timetables, names of arriving starships, the texts of demagogue sermons, decodings of Vox intercepts, and much else. Processing this, the colossal machines produce daily info prophecies that assist the Captain General in decision-making and ensure that 10,000 eyes overlook nothing. And finally, even the Phalanx constitutes a threat, being an integral component of Terra's defences. As the ancient archives attest, during the era of the Great Crusade, the Emperor often voyaged the galaxy aboard this titanic, warp-capable battle station. Then it served as the flagship of the Imperial Fist, and to this day remains the chapter's principal operational base. It is believed that during the heresy, this remarkable star vessel stood over Terra and took part in her defence. If that is so, then the Phalanx somehow survived those cataclysmic engagements, as it did the battles of the long millennia that followed. The Star Fortress nearly perished in the year of the fall of Cadia. At first, the stellar fort was almost overrun by demons, who poured onto its decks in the passage through the Immaterium, and thereafter it wrestled with a traitorous armada of colossal firepower. Yet the battle station withstood the blows of fate, successfully delivered many loyal warriors of the Imperium into the system of Sol, and took its sanctified position in orbit above the throne world. Since then, the phalanx has been repaired, restored to full combat readiness, and cleansed of sectors tainted by the corruption of chaos. The Citadel's compartments are in perpetual tumult, genetically augmented labour units flit to and fro, adepts of the Ministorum endlessly recite their daily prayers. It is unsurprising that the Adeptus Custodes have easily embedded their agents there. These unbidden guests, hiding in plain sight, watch events upon the phalanx with meticulous care and stand ready, if need be, to take decisive measures. From the Custodes perspective, even the most loyal of Space Marine chapters are, in theory, capable of treachery. By duty, the Praetorians forget nothing and forgive no offence, for they know all too well how trust in the Primarch concluded. Thus, should the Star Fort ever train a gun upon the Imperial Palace, the Golden Guard will invoke secret protocols and end the phalanx before the first shot is fired. In a battle for survival, there are no bystanders, and there is no place to which such a war will not roll. Therefore, fight without mercy or doubt, for death knows them not. Captain General Constantine Valdor. He who holds the office of Captain General commands one of the Imperium's most powerful armed formations, and is charged with the defence of the entire Sol system, Terra, the Imperial Palace, and ultimately the Golden Throne and the Emperor of Mankind himself. He commands the Adeptus Custodes, and as has happened many times in past centuries, holds a seat on the Council of the High Lords of Terra. Moreover, he is obliged to lead the Custodes' largest military companies and to possess a mastery of warfare rivaled by few save the Primarchs. Across the millennia since the Great Crusade, only 17 Custodes have been fated to bear so grave a responsibility. As a rule, Captain Generals perish in battle or on the sacred soil of Terra, or far from it, while directing the Imperium's most critical operations among the stars. Several leaders have laid down their offices to become the Emperor's eyes, and a further 3, including Constantine Valdor himself, vanished under circumstances shrouded in mystery even to their brethren. Throughout the history of the Imperium, very few warriors have even approached the lofty standard of martial skill, self-sacrifice and generalship set by Constantine Valdor, the first Captain General of the 10,000. He was so exceptional a warrior that it was said he could have met the Primarchs blade to blade on equal terms. Yet Valdor's chief value to the Emperor was by no means simply that of a fighter. From the first days of the Unification Wars, and perhaps even earlier, Constantine remained the most faithful companion of the Emperor of Mankind. The Captain General would sooner have taken his own life than permit any threat to the life of the Emperor of Mankind. Absolutely devoted to his liege, Valdor would have done anything to save him and paid whatever price was demanded. It is said embodied all the ideals of the Adeptus Custodes: courageous, steadfast, vigilant, wise, and when required, a true leader capable of inspiring others. Valdor, a genuine hero of the Imperium, suffered no failure in his office. The archives contain no record of what befell the Captain General after the Emperor ascended the Golden Throne, but some remain convinced that he still serves the Emperor of Mankind. At present, the office of Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes is held by Trajan Valoris. Many hold that since the days when the Emperor still marched in the Great Crusade, Valoris is the greatest warrior ever to become Captain General. During his first 10 years of service in the ranks of the Custodes, he was victor in not one, but 2 consecutive blood games, and that record has yet to be beaten by any. By virtue of remarkable tactical ability and an innate appetite for aggression, Trajan earned a place among the Alaris Terminators. In subsequent engagements, Valoris earned a multitude of names for his deeds: for the destruction of the Space Hulk, the Sorrowful Siren; for the eradication of the Gent cult, the writhing shadow of the Emperor; and for leading the vanguard of a preemptive strike against an Orc. If Valoris has a weakness, it is his unwillingness to wait for his enemies to come to him. He remained among the companions for only 22 years, and then, owing to that same thirst for decisive action, received a different posting. He was soon promoted to Shield Captain, and in that rank the custodian spent several decades commanding his fellows on sorties both within the Sol system and beyond. Valoris became famed for his meticulous study of his foes and for predicting their moves, only then to deliver a sudden, lethal thrust. Aware of his tendency to impetuous deeds, Valoris constantly strove to temper it by gathering the fullest intelligence possible before striking. Because of this, the strikes of the Shield Captain always fell upon the right points, and none of his subordinates ever died because of a rash command decision. When Captain General Andros Launcedre fell in battle, Trajan was chosen as his successor. By custom, Valoris was handed the armour and arms of his former lord. The masterful accoutrements were forged after the disappearance of Constantine Valdor, and have since been passed from one lord of the Adeptus Custodes to another. The first of these artifacts is the Watcher's Axe, a colossal weapon whose blade is wreathed in golden lightning, capable of cleaving a hellbrute sarcophagus with a single stroke. Built into its haft is a masterfully fashioned bolter called the Eagle's Scream, of astonishing rate of fire, disgorging armour-piercing rounds tipped with adamantium. The second principal relic is the Castellan Plate, an impeccably executed suit of power armour bearing a heraldic escutcheon and an auramite halo. The Captain General's magnificent cloak is woven from adamantium threads so that it flows like fabric yet withstands gunfire and blade strikes. At Trajan's waist is secured a mysterious device called the Moment Shackle, an inheritance from the dark age of technology recovered from the vaults beneath the palace. By employing it, Valoris seizes charges of temporal energy and bends them to his will. He can, for example, pluck from history an event lasting but a fraction of a second, or slow time about himself to alter the course of a desperate battle. Trajan proved himself an active and skillful Captain General. Under his rule, the number of bloody games increased tenfold. The defence of the stable warplanes into the Sol system was strengthened, and the hives of Terra were cleansed of cults long lurked there. Little escapes the attention of Valoris's ever-growing intelligence network, and in the course of its covert operations, the Praetorians, imbued with absolute certainty of their righteousness, have eradicated dozens of threats to the Golden Throne. Moreover, Trajan Valoris foresaw Guilliman's return and the appearance of the Great Rift, and thus had time to prepare the Adeptus Custodes for the coming changes. Rumour holds that Valoris aided the Moment Shackle with their still not fully understood capabilities. In any case, the manifold talents of the Captain General make him the ideal commander of the 10,000 in this age of unprecedented savagery. The Adeptus Custodes reject the very notion of blind obedience and look with contempt upon those who follow orders from above without question. As is well known, the heresy of Horus itself became possible because of similar practices among the Legiones Astartes. Each Praetorian is expected to pose questions, and it is no surprise that the Golden Guard respect only those leaders who have proven themselves worthy of their rank. Commanders who have time and again demonstrated insight and strategic genius, as well as strength of spirit and intellect. Such heroes are called shield captains, and their comrades follow them with loyalty and devotion. Few weapons in the Imperium's arsenal can match the might of the senior officers of the 10,000. These superlative warriors are capable of defeating an entire squad of heretic Astartes in close quarters, of severing the head from a monstrous Xenos the size of a tank, or of mowing down the chained ranks of ordinary soldiery with deadly fire. Whether they cleave foes with the arc of an axe, pierce or hack with a blade, or impale victims upon the crackling discharge-laden tip of a guardian spear, shield captains display flawless mastery of their chosen arms. Some of them, quicker in thought and deed, soar above the fray astride jet bikes. Others, notable for their bellicosity and aggression, teleport into the field in Alarus Terminator armor to overthrow enemy leaders and send their underlings fleeing in panic. Regardless of personal preference in weapons, shield captains, as befits legendary warriors, are impeccable in the arts of war. Moreover, these Custodes are not only peerless fighters, but also discerning commanders with excellent tactical acumen, able at a glance to divine the course of a battle and to apply their forces accordingly. Upon the shoulders of the Praetorian officers rests a heavy burden of responsibility, for to squander the lives of the Emperor's personal bodyguards in vain is an unforgivable sin. Fear and doubt are unknown to shield captains. Consequently, to other warriors of the Imperium they may seem haughty and overconfident. That impression, however, is mistaken. The senior officers of the Golden Legion are alien to such selfish traits as vanity. They assess with the utmost sobriety how high the stakes are in any campaign, and it is evident that shield captains act accordingly. Every word they utter is beyond question. Every act they commit is suffused with resolve. Officers brook no impediments in their path, whether the machinations of enemies or the pomposity, ignorance and prejudices of allies. Yet it does not follow that shield captains are incapable of inspiring mere mortals. On the contrary, they radiate an almost magnetic charisma, and ordinary imperial soldiers feel as if these golden giants have stepped from the pages of Holy Writ. Their mere presence is enough to seize the faithful with religious ecstasy. Fears and doubts are dispelled and replaced by an absolute conviction that the Emperor watches over his servants and will safeguard their souls should they fall in battle that day. Moreover, officers of the Adeptus Custodes are accomplished diplomats, versed in the subtleties of high society. They know the secrets and customs of the powerful, which allows the Praetorians to cajole, inspire, intimidate, or otherwise manipulate those necessary to the fulfillment of their will. Shield Captain is an exclusively martial title, and the custodian who bears it is obliged to direct the actions of his brethren on the field of battle. This honorific is generic in character, qualifying hundreds of other titles, some symbolic, others dictated by tradition. Some are retained only for the duration of a particular assignment or tenure of office. Others are bestowed in perpetuity. When the Adeptus Custodes go to war, they are often led by several shield captains at once. At times, such champions fight shoulder to shoulder. Alliances such as the Golden Brothers or the Trio of Heralds are famed for their resounding feats. In other circumstances, one officer will assume overall command of an especially important mission, while his comrades augment his martial prowess with counsel and wisdom. The question of who shall hold ascendancy is usually settled without needless dispute, for shield captains candidly discuss one another's strengths and swiftly determine who among them is best suited to the task. In essence, these custodes embody the pragmatic approach of 10,000 in waging conquest for the Emperor's sake. When the shield companies of the Golden Legion march to battle against the enemies of humanity, the backbone of the formation is formed by the custodian wardens. These infantrymen can be considered rank and file only in the sense that there are more of them than the praetorians who specialize in particular aspects of warfare. Even a single golden warden is a truly fearsome instrument of destruction. Any shot he makes strikes true, and in his chopping, slicing and thrusting strokes there is unmatched swordsmanship, perfect movement and battlefield instinct. It is no wonder that foes fall dead at such a hero's feet as leaves in autumn. A common custodian, monstrously strong, phenomenally resilient, and utterly ignorant of fear and doubt, matches the most outstanding fighters among the myriad enemies of the Imperium in every respect. Such Praetorians are unbreakable in defence and unstoppable in assault. Custodian wardens are not attached to any fixed company. They are at liberty to change units before each new campaign, or even between engagements. Because every warden of the Emperor possesses a singular style of combat, their squads operate in a manner wholly unlike ordinary soldiers' detachments. For these warriors, it suffices to know that at their side, fight-worthy comrades ready to cover their backs in close-quarters combat. As with all warriors of the 10,000, the power of the Emperor courses through the veins of the custodian wardens, and his hand shelters them like an aegis. The traditional armament of these Praetorians is the Guardian Spear, a gilded halberd so weighty that even several mortals could not raise it. Its form marries a power blade, capable of cleaving a Chaos Space Marine in twain, with a bolter for engaging targets at range. Some custodians, however, prefer in combat the combination of Storm Shield and Sentinel Blade, a broad, terrifyingly immense sword so enormous that on either side of its hilt there are mounted the barrels of bolt casters, which unleash volleys of fragmenting rounds at short range. That Praetorians wield such weapons one-handed speaks volumes about their physical prowess. Augmenting the cleaver's might with the reliable protection of a storm shield fitted with an integrated energy field generator, the Golden Guards rend foes to pieces with ease while withstanding the most crushing counterstrikes. As befits such august fighters, custodian detachments frequently enter battle aboard ancient land raiders. Warriors who are demigods, supported by a colossal armoured vehicle, possess truly dreadful power. Faced with the simultaneous furious onrush of several Praetorian formations in land raiders, even titanic demonic spawn and the enemy's super-heavy war machines are unable to hold. Each custodian's armour and weapons are hand-forged specifically for him, so every suit of plates, etched with unique patterns and lavish ornament, is an inimitable masterpiece of the smith's art. Nevertheless, there are standardized elements within the Praetorian's kit that allow them to quickly ascertain a comrade's role both on and off the field of battle. Upon the right pauldron of a custodian's armour rests the imperial aquila, a sign of eternal vigilance and a mark that the Golden Guardian has the right to execute the Emperor's will, by force if necessary. The gems used to decorate the armour are sought in the deep mines of Terra, and then hand-worked by master jewellers. Each of the stones set into the lames of every warrior in a shield company bears exactly the same hue, a fact that itself attests to the craftsman's art. When a Praetorian transfers to another unit, the gems are carefully removed from his plates and replaced with stones of the new shade. The coloured inlay on the custodian's left pauldron unambiguously indicates to which shield company or host he belongs. In the event of conflicting shades, the colour of the larger formation is used. As a rule, the tabard of a praetorian shares the same colour, as do any other accoutrements. The armour of all the Adeptus Custodes is forged from the extraordinarily rare metal auramite. It possesses a natural golden hue that suits the Emperor's personal bodyguards perfectly. Through highly classified alchemical processes, the coloration of auramite can be subtly adjusted or even wholly altered. Such work is laborious and costly, and it is held that mere repainting of the armour is beneath the exalted status of the Guardians. The haft or hilt of a Praetorian's weapon is often fashioned or frequently reworked so that the piece matches the armour in colour. This custom is not, however, observed in every shield company. When a candidate is raised into the ranks of the Adeptus Custodes, he is presented with a superbly wrought dagger called the Misericordia. The hilt of such a weapon is fitted precisely to the grip of its owner. The blade is suffused with micromolecular spirits whose vibrations permit the point to pass through the thickest armour as though it did not exist. But the Misericordia is not merely the most dangerous of personal weapons. Its significance runs far deeper. It is said that such ceremonial daggers first appeared in the darkest days of Terra's history, when cruel military dictators ruled by the sword. Such weapons of tyranny were called the Misericordia. It is believed, however, that after the Emperor's wars of Unification, his bodyguards adopted the term and invested it with a different meaning. From a symbol of autocracy, the blade became a sign that its bearer is empowered to act as the executor of sentences pronounced by the Emperor of mankind, to take the lives of demagogues and lunatics who rise against him. The possession of such a dagger still marks a warrior as an executioner acting by the Emperor's will, but after the battle with Horus, the daggers acquired yet another, darker implication. They became instruments of vengeance against those who turned upon the Emperor of mankind, against those whose treachery left him a ravaged shell. It is told that each time a blade is driven into a traitor's heart, a tiny portion of vengeance is wrought in the name of the Emperor of mankind. Generally, the custodians are averse to such superstition, yet there are some among their ranks who believe that by spilling enough traitors' blood, the Praetorians will somehow restore their lord. Adherents of another theory hold that the wounds inflicted by these daggers will, sooner or later, undo the mighty heirs of Horus, and that the Black Legion, together with its captains, will perish by 1,000 cuts. Thus, although the Golden Guards are not obliged to carry these weapons, they almost always hang the daggers at their hips before engaging the heretical Astartes. Custodian guards are distinguished by the ceremonial robes they wear over their armour, garments befitting the status of a veteran. Each custodian guard has served the Emperor for no fewer than 5 centuries. These warriors are armed either with the Guardian spears, traditional to the Golden Legion, or with Castellan's axes bearing massive blades. Such axes are supremely suited to the honed, remorseless strokes in which a Praetorian's prodigious strength is multiplied by the mass of his weapon. Delivering a fearsome blow, the warrior with staggering swiftness alters the arc of his sweep, tears through his victim's defence, and severs head or limb in a single, clean stroke. If an enemy attempts to cheat death by keeping his distance, the custodian guard will annihilate him with dense volleys of bolt rounds spat from the haft of the axe. Among their brethren, such fighters are famed as imperturbable, infinitely patient sentinels. Having donned the vestments that mark their station within the Brotherhood, the custodians bind themselves by an oath that compels them to fight like indomitable watchmen. to stand athwart the foe as an impregnable, living bulwark. The oath of each of these Praetorians is unique, for it is penned by the warrior himself after a year-long period of meditation. Fidelity to that oath means more to him than life itself. Therefore, his resolve, at first striking in its hardness, reaches truly fearsome extremes. When defences must be breached, an enemy vessel boarded, or the leader of heresy and his retinue cut down, the Adeptus Custodians are sent into the fray, for these golden guardians unleash sudden, savage strikes aimed at the very heart. These Praetorians take their name from the model of their Terminator armour, masterfully wrought plate whose cost is measured in planets. Alarus pattern harnesses, fashioned from layered plates of auramite and adamantium, are fitted with Leonis-class actuators and draw their power from magnetomic generator shrines. Each of these masterpieces of the armourer's art affords its bearer astonishing freedom of movement and scarcely diminishes his speed while augmenting his strength and endurance. A warrior clad in such harness will remain whole and unhurt, even should a macro cannon round detonate beneath his feet. Coupled with the blessed protection granted by the Emperor of mankind, one may rightly call the Alarus the most reliable model of personal combat armour in the entire Imperium. Indeed, such qualities are precisely what battles fought by the Terminators of the Adeptus Custodes demand. The weapons of the Praetorians are no less imposing than their plate. Alarus Custodians impale foes with guardian spears measuring 2 human heights in length, or cleave them with enormous Castellan axes that, in a single blow, bisect a Chaos Lord or lop the head from an Orcish Psyker's shoulders. In addition to that arsenal, ballistus grenade launchers with drum magazines are mounted upon the left forearms of the Terminators. At the warrior's mental signal, such a launcher covers the foe with a hail of illuminating rounds. The ballistus may also be loaded with concussion grenades, which not only detonate in a blinding flash and an unbearable roar, but also expel electro-expelling reflectors. Under such bombardment, the enemy is temporarily blinded, deafened and convulses in agonizing spasms, while all of his equipment is rendered inoperative. Employing such equipment, the Alarus Custodians suppress with fire and swiftly cut down the bodyguards of their quarry, after which the principal prize stands exposed and defenceless before the fury of the Praetorians. Terminators, personally chosen by the Captain General from the most belligerent fighters among 10,000, will not pass up the opportunity to plunge headlong into the most perilous engagements. Any Alarus possesses the perfect instinct of an executioner, his wrath honed like the edge of a blade, yet these custodians are not reckless berserkers. The galaxy contains many masters of close combat driven solely by rage, but in the case of the Praetorians, every action is governed by will. In each of their blows, destructive force is directed with surgical precision. The relentlessness and valour of the Alarus are such that, when necessary, their squads split immediately after the initial strike, and the warriors singly penetrate deep into the enemy rear. Fighting without support, these custodians annihilate high-value targets, sow confusion and panic among those taken by surprise, and utterly destabilize the situation ahead of the arrival of fresh forces of the Golden Legion, which complete the rout. The efficacy of this tactic is borne out by the role of heretical bastions felled by attacks from within. In recent years, one Alarus cohort has achieved outstanding success by employing tactics of intimidation and acting as executioners. Under the unyielding Vanius Artron Tibus, the detachment, the Gilded Fist, has been famed for brutal deeds in the name of the Emperor of Mankind. It was these warriors who eradicated the Ulgworm cult in the Pan-Cyberic cluster, ended the frenzied intrigues of Inquisitor Dian Loxtos, and led the purge of the traitor-held space hulk Leviathan of Agonies, preventing it from approaching the borders of the Sol system. Unusually for the Custodes, the fighters of the detachment have fought together for several decades, believing that they best serve the Emperor as a single, tightly bonded brotherhood. Few doubt this, for in the ranks of the Gilded Fist, shoulder to shoulder, stand truly celebrated heroes. But it is not only the weapons and armour of the Praetorians that are fashioned to recall martial triumphs. From antiquity, the same has been true of the proud vexilla banners beneath which some of the most seasoned soldiers of the Golden Legion fight. A vexillum is a tall standard surmounted by the imperial aquila, the chief symbol of the Emperor of Mankind's authority. The use of the two-headed eagle as the principal heraldic element is permitted only to the Adeptus Custodes, and such a standard produces a strikingly inspiring effect on all who stand nearby. Hovering high above the turmoil of battle, a vexillum becomes a golden beacon of the true light, before which the faithful servants of the Emperor are filled with reverence. Under the shadow of the aquila, even the humblest defender of the Imperium feels the Emperor of Mankind's touch upon his soul. The enemies of humanity, by contrast, shrink with dread. Their limbs slacken and their thoughts falter at the realization that the Emperor's greatest warriors already stand ready to tear them apart. Vexillas are created on Terra by oath-bound masters of the Tower Aquilan, and the painstaking work on each standard endures for 100 years. Upon the completion of their labours, a solemn procession of palace artisans, priests of the Ministorum, and heraldic servitors delivers the splendid banner to the Auric Eyrie, where it is placed upon stasis podia until the hour when it is required. Some banners are employed solely for ritual purposes, borne in processions and parades through the endless corridors of the imperial palace. But the majority of vexillas, furnished with highly practical devices, are intended for the rigours of warfare. The standards with which veterans of the shield companies march to war are typically of one of several types. Vexillas are not mere banners meant to inspire reverence or fear. They contain specialized systems that render invaluable support to the Adeptus Custodes who fight beneath the golden standard. Most commonly encountered are the so-called Vexilla Imperius, whose very presence fills the Praetorians fighting nearby with unshakable resolve and confers upon them renewed vigour. Whether this phenomenon is the result of a purely psychological effect or the operation of some arcane technology is known only to the inhabitants of the Tower Aquilan. For everyone else, it suffices that it exists and produces results. Vexilla Defensa are taken into battle against enemies possessing overwhelming firepower. Embedded within this proud standard is a generator of a high-energy reflective field that cloaks nearby allies beneath a force dome. The deployment of standards of this type has given rise to many legends and tales. To naive soldiers, it seems as if the Emperor himself shields those who fight shoulder to shoulder with his chosen warriors. Vexilla Magnifica is outfitted with photophantasmic fluctuators and psycho-amplifactor clarions. Anyone who dares to attack the bearer of such a banner, or his comrades, will be dazzled by the shining majesty of the Emperor of Mankind. Enemy auto-trackers will fail, their optical nerves will be seared, and their thoughts will collapse into incoherent fragments. Such standards crown the spear of an assault to prevent the foe from mounting a counter-offensive. Beyond the technological marvels named above, Each vexilla houses a teleportational beacon, shielded from the influence of the warp. These beacons are ordinarily used to deliver reinforcements whose sudden appearance catches the enemy unawares. Occasionally, Contemptor dreadnoughts or land raiders may be teleported onto the field of battle. This is made possible by the vast, ancient and potent teleportariums installed aboard the Custodes starships. Such devices are perfectly suited to the style of warfare favoured by the Praetorians. They employ teleports to halt an unexpected breakthrough, to exploit a breach in the enemy's lines, or to confound the foe by abruptly altering the course of the engagement. Additionally, vexillas continuously transmit by directed beam sets of coded identifiers containing operational information for allied imperial forces, enabling those forces to act in coordinated concert. Golden standards bolster the morale of the Adeptus Custodes allies, and the vexillous praetors themselves are consummate masters of combat. Consequently, shield companies almost invariably go to war beneath the shadow of such banners. A detachment of Virtus praetors erupts into battle astride the mighty Dawn-Eagle jet bikes. Veteran custodians, who have fought upon hundreds of worlds, understand perfectly well how vital speed is in combat. They must not merely close with the enemy, but strike at the right moment and in the right place. Having determined where their fellows are hardest pressed, the Praetorians thunder straight to that point. These flying detachments act as scouts for their shield companies, soaring above the field of battle and relaying by vox the enemy's manoeuvres. When a squadron of jet bikes circles the battlefield with keen-eyed pilots at the controls, the shield captain may be confident that his foes have little chance of surprising him. Every Virtus praetor is a peerless warrior, his superhuman skills honed through long service in the ranks of the Adeptus Custodes. A marksman of exceptional precision, he fells enemies even while hurtling at breakneck speed through labyrinthine ruins or tangled forest. They are no less stupendous in close quarters. Each one is capable, with a single pass, of cleaving an opponent's throat through the stoutest armour. Even in the very heart of the melee, within a fraction of a second, and while continuously analysing the situation, the Praetorians nimbly thread around obstacles, overtake fleeing foes, and astonishingly quickly appraise any shift in the disposition of forces. Beyond their outstanding abilities, the jet bike pilots are superbly equipped. They are armed with colossal interceptor lances. This fearsome spear, longer than an ogrin is tall and flawlessly balanced, terminates in an adamantium blade wreathed in a rending field. Virtus praetors are masters of short, rapid strikes. At full speed, they impale preselected enemies with their pikes, immediately withdraw their weapons from the bodies, and streak away. Such blows are lethal, each ending in a geyser of blood. Yet the Praetorians' principal weapon is their flying mechanical mounts. The magnificent Dawn-Eagle jet bikes are relics of the crusade, forged from auramite and adamantium. In size, they are only marginally smaller than a light fighter and can accelerate to near the speed of sound, while remaining, in essence, grav skimmers. Thanks to their phenomenally resilient hulls, a jet bike's rider can ram walls and enemy warriors without risk of being unseated. At the same time, the Dawn-Eagle responds instantly to the slightest touch of the controls, slipping away from enemy fire with effortless grace. Jet bikes, fitted with hurricane bolter mounts, can cleave bloody swathes through enemy hordes, but it is on skimmers equipped with salvo launchers that Virtus praetors show their finest work, annihilating enemy armour with lightning assaults. Rushing across the battlefield, the custodians swiftly wheel onto the enemy flank, surround its heaviest war engines and destroy them with fired melter rockets. Even aerial targets may fall victim to the Praetorians. With concentrated fire, they create in the sky a true screen, lethal to the foe's swift aircraft. Emitting a war cry amplified through Vox dynamic speakers, rage-filled dreadnoughts mercilessly crash into the enemy and rend its ranks with mighty volleys from weapons that replace one of the two-legged machine's arms. Either the enemy's armor is reduced to molten husks under the assault of concentrated melter energy, or infantrymen collapse to the ground, torn apart by bolts from the spinning barrels of an assault cannon. The other arm of a dreadnought terminates in a fist the size of a wrecking ball, a gilded armoured gauntlet capable of tearing a tank's turret free or shattering every bone in an enemy's body with a single blow. Employing both implements with the unequalled skill characteristic of the Praetorians, the Contemptor sows death and devastation through the enemy ranks. It rends the heart from any army daring to rise against the Emperor and drives the survivors into headlong flight. Any one of the revered dreadnoughts is an ancient war machine, a relic filled with technological marvels that the modern Imperium cannot reproduce. The dreadnought's hull plating, meticulously tended, is fashioned from exquisitely worked auramite plates. The machine's limbs are driven by bundles of pseudo-muscles and servo-motors that grant it colossal physical strength. The walker's weapons are perfectly calibrated, and their protection is augmented by a crackling shield that reflects lance beams and artillery rounds in brilliant flashes of energy. Thanks to self-repair protocols, Contemptors pay no heed even to the most grievous damage. If a walker is severely damaged in battle, redundant systems kick in. But the pivotal element in this array of mysterious devices is, without question, the warrior buried alive within the dreadnought's central sarcophagus. Although the custodians are extraordinarily hardy and resilient, even they can suffer mortal wounds. Found at death's door, some Praetorians express a desire to continue fighting for the Emperor, whereupon they are placed within a vacant walker. One must understand clearly that by this act the custodians perform martyrdom. For life within a dreadnought's sarcophagus, even one as perfected as a Contemptor, is at best a barely conscious existence. All superfluous flesh is removed from the pilot, reducing him to a meat sack of organs and brain matter that floats in a tank of armoured glass filled with amniotic fluid. The warrior is eternally linked to the bipedal machine's life support systems. From that moment, its mighty limbs are the guardian's arms and legs, and its complex sensorium and vox dynamic speaker are his eyes, ears, and mouth. A fallen Praetorian becomes a god of war, unharmed as he weathers barrages of fire and smites the Emperor of mankind's foes with the blows of hydraulic manipulator arms. The reverse of such grandeur is eternal isolation from the world and the connection to mechanical feedback devices incapable of fully conveying the warmth of the sun upon the skin or the pleasant sinking of a blade into hostile flesh. Yet history records custodians who, though uninjured, consented to take a seat in a Contemptor after the previous pilot fell in battle. Those volunteers were custodians who either intended to leave Terra, believed they had brought shame upon themselves, or simply decided to do so because they deemed it their duty. In any case, all of them sacrificed their bodies so that the dreadnoughts of the Golden Legion might continue to fight. Hastorius Calaxor first assumed the burden of command during the Great Siege, the final battle of the Horus Heresy. It was he who, alone, held the stairway of the Enlightener, repelling the assaults of the treacherous soldiers of the 9th Regiment, the Terran Wardens. He gathered around himself detachments of heavy infantry, inspiring the warriors with his courage, and at their head recaptured the Dome of the Architects from Dorthacol and his heretical Astartes of the 16th Legion. Rejoining one of the detachments of the Custodian Guard, Calixor utterly annihilated that squad of the Sons of Horus, and in the process claimed a warp jackal for his tally. A Hound-class Titan that had fought on the side of the renegades. For these deeds, Hasturius was promoted to Shield Captain in the midst of battle, and until the end of the siege he conducted 3 further, exceedingly successful counteroffensives. Thereafter, Calixor became famed for his mastery of aggressive tactics, and over the course of centuries earned many sobriquets. On Thard, the Custodians slew the demon Thogralathrax, preventing it from infecting the throne world with a putrescent plague. Fighting for the Starkeep Magnificence, Hasturius engaged the heretical Singer of Miseries in single combat, after which he mounted his jet bike and, commanding a squad of Virtus Praetors, exterminated the traitors who had overrun the station. Finally, with a single sweep of his blade, he put an end to the fugitive assassin Shay, denying the deadly killer the chance to approach the Golden Throne within 100 miles. When the Shield Captain fell in battle upon the dead world Palathrix, an unimaginable force of will held him fast until he could be linked to a dreadnought sarcophagus. Since that time, the venerable ancient Calixor has carried out other duties within the ranks of the 10,000. Encased within a living war machine, he not only fights, but also aids the Adeptus Custodes in matters of strategy. Perhaps the most powerful and tactically flexible combat tanks in the arsenal of the imperial forces of the 41st millennium are the Land Raiders. Possessing fearsome hull-side armaments and super-durable adamantium armor, they can carry a full squad of warriors in heavy kit onto the battlefield. It is unsurprising, then, that Land Raiders perform with equal facility both as shock-armored vehicles and as assault transports. Even a single such colossus can turn the tide of the most desperate engagement in the Imperium's favour, and a wedge of Land Raiders can win a war. The Land Raiders have one flaw: there are few of them. Only a handful of Forge Worlds have not yet lost the secret knowledge required to produce this class of armoured vehicle, and the construction of even a single machine consumes vast resources and time. The complex machine spirits of Land Raiders are fiercely bellicose, and so lengthy rituals are required to bind them. As a result, the cost of assembling one such tank is comparable to the expenditure required to produce 100 less potent armoured vehicles. Each Land Raider is revered as an invaluable relic, entrusted only to the Imperium's most elite warriors and deployed only when victory is a matter of life and death. He who allows the destruction of such a war machine commits an almost irredeemable sin, and entire campaigns have been waged to recover crippled Land Raiders left upon the field of battle. At the disposal of the Adeptus Custodes are the most ancient and storied machines, known as Venerable Land Raiders. The history of many of them began at the very dawn of the Imperium. These adamantine giants took part in the earth-shattering armoured offensives of the Great Crusade. In liberating humanity from the horrors of the Long Night, they crushed alien invaders beneath their tracks, and later, when the treachery of the traitor legions came to light, they mercilessly tore the heretical Astartes apart with their guns. For 10,000 years, the proud armoured machines have fought for mankind's dominion, and the deeds of each have become a legend no less resplendent than those of the Imperium's greatest champions. Within each venerable land, Raider dwells a Magos-level machine spirit, a noble and ardent entity that, when necessary, will independently aim the weapons and open fire, and will likewise preside over rites of self-repair. Tales are told of how the Custodes tanks continued to fight steadfastly even after the deaths of their crews, delivering bloody vengeance for the deaths of the Praetorians. The fact that these armoured machines are the principal ground transport of the 10,000 alone makes plain the might of the elite Golden Legion. The long road, begun in the darkness of the long night, led the Custodes through the fires of the heresy, through 100 centuries shrouded in ignorance and the perversion of truth, to the cold light of the present. Throughout all these millennia, the Golden Legion has never faltered, and will not falter henceforth.